Oh, pretty good.
Good.
I just got. Oh, I'm on video. I'm not supposed to be video, but there was something covering the screen there. So, uh, yeah, last class.
Yeah, the in-person on the 20th, for sure.
And I had completely forgotten that was the day I was supposed to be in Richmond.
Uh-huh.
And I'm scheduled to be in Pittsburgh to see my parents the 17th, 18th, and 19th.
Okay.
And we're taking the dog with us, and I was like, okay, sweetie, we're gonna have to go straight to Richmond, from Pittsburgh, and find a place to keep the dog.
Oh.
So we did it.
Good.
It's just gonna be a long week.
Yeah, it will be a long week. I love Pittsburgh, though.
It's a nice. It's different now than when I grew up there. But.
Yeah, I bet. It looks. I don't know. It's just, we went for a weekend, my husband and I was like, "This is the cutest city ever."
It does have a lot of features, and it is quite the melting pot.
I really liked that, and we ate so much good food. To the what is the Cathedral of Renee?
Oh, yeah.
So.
Were you there at Christmas?
Oh, it was football season because there was a football game, and you certainly knew it.
In the Cathedral of Learning at Christmas, there's in the I guess 3 floors there are personality rooms.
Yeah.
And all the different groups that I guess settled in the Pittsburgh area, and they all decorate each one. Trees and not all cultures have trees as part of their tradition, but one of their traditional ornaments and that would be pretty to see.
Yeah, I would love to go back and see it. I'm into that stuff.
Hey, Beth.
Hey, how are you?
Oh, good. Okay, so you can hear me.
I can, and I made you presenter so you can share your screen.
Okay, that was what I was trying to figure out how we were going to do that. Let me up then.
Yeah. Or I do it. It's up to you.
No, I got them.
Okay.
I can't remember.
I know, me neither. And this is the public WebEx, so it's slightly different than what you and I are used to.
Okay.
I think there should be share on the top left, like there's like a toolbar.
Your screen.
Yeah.
Second.
Yep.
Sorry, I'm getting ready to do a presentation.
I see it.
All right. That.
How are you feeling?
I'm feeling great.
Are you back?
Great. I'm back. I came back. Let's see, March, the month of March.
Okay.
Although I'll be honest with you, it seems like it's sort of like a light work.
It happens.
And that's mainly just because, with the snow, and then my kids have been sick, and then I was sick, and so
everyone was sick.
I'm so behind on things, but
Yeah.
I'm back. Yeah, I mean
That's good.
for the most part.
This is 3 for you, is that right?
Oh no, 2.
2, okay.
Yep, 2. 2, a surprise 2.
Surprise!
Which it was a very good surprise. It was just we've had to like get back.
Yeah. You're like, oh, I think I remember.
Right. My first daughter she's 8. So
okay.
and
Yeah.
so she's super helpful, but it was just sort of like, okay, I don't remember what a baby needs, you know. I figure it out
Probably like
quickly.
technology, I feel, changes so quickly.
Yeah, and recommendations change.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, that's exciting.
So now let me ask you this. I
Yes.
have my screen up. Is there a way that I can see who is connected? And
Yes.
that way, if there's questions or
I can help you moderate that if you can't see. Can you see do you see something that says participants?
I see like a, hold on, maybe I can, I see like a box. Like view video, I don't know.
Because I'm not sure what you can see out there.
Yeah, sure.
But I can help moderate, like if someone has a question, I can moderate the chat box for you too.
Okay.
And I'll just jump in, I guess.
Yeah. So, I mean, it very, very flexible. So just interrupt me if you need to.
Okay, I will.
Mary, when you're sharing your screen, you can see when we make comments.
I know, but I don't know because
Oh, wait, hold on. Maybe I've got display settings.
like mouse up, Renee, does something drop down like a does it down?
Yeah, let me see if I can. Oh, apparently stopped sharing. Sorry about that.
No worries.
Oh, hold on.
That was a real eureka moment. I could hear
it. Yeah. Okay. Now. Slides?
Yes.
Okay, I see the people in the call.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, so it looks like there's, let's see, like 6 people?
Yep.
Oh, great. So when you want to start, Meredith, that's just up to you. You just tell me when you think you got the...
Okay. Yeah, I'll just get us started.
Okay, perfect.
So, because some people couldn't today, they're going to watch the recording.
You're going to record it?
Yes. Yes. Sorry, did I not tell you?
You might. No, and that's totally fine. Can I have access to it?
Yes, of course, of course.
Fantastic. Okay.
I'll share that with you.
Yeah, that's great. Okay.
So yes, welcome everyone to our last online class for the Farmers Market Certification Program. You made it. I'm very proud of all of you. We are coming into the end, so this means next Friday you have a day off to prepare your presentation, because the Friday after that, the 20th, we will all meet for our last get-together that is in person in Richmond at St. Stephen's Church. I just emailed you all out the address. That day, we do have one last topic to cover, so we have Dr. Martha Walker from Extension coming one last time to talk about conflict management. So that will be the morning. We can get lunch at the cafe there like we did last time. And in the afternoon, you will all be presenting to the group for 5 to 10 minutes. And I sent out directions for you for that, and we'll cover that after today's presentations. Today's topic is food safety at the market, and we are very lucky to have Dr. Renee Boyer from Extension, who is our expert on the topic and who I pester regularly.
Nah.
So she's going to present, and we should have someone from the Department of Health calling in around 11. So, Dr. Boyer, take it away.
And sure. Welcome everyone, and I don't know how the previous presentations have gone, but we'll keep this pretty informal, and if anyone has a question, type it into the chat, and Meredith will let me know. I'm not sure I can see the chat. I can see the people that are on the call, but so she can know, and so we can hopefully answer questions in real time, and then we'll have time to answer some questions at the end. Just a little bit about me. I'm a associate professor in the Food Science and Technology Department. I'm a food microbiologist, but also do a lot of outreach related to consumer food safety. And farmers markets are sort of near and dear to my heart in terms of folks using farmers markets and making sure that they are successful. And so, since food safety is my expertise, we are going to talk about food handler best practices at the market. So I understand that the folks on this call are market managers. So as I go through this call, I'm hopefully going to be talking to you as a manager about some things that you all can implement that would improve the safety or reduce food safety risk, reduce risks of foodborne pathogens at the market. Also, maybe some ways that you can share some of this information with vendors to help get them to reduce risk as well. And so most of the things that I'll talk about, I hopefully are pretty easy implementations that are not too daunting for vendors to use at the market. To this call, and I'm sure that everyone's seen this slide. You all know this. It's just been a tremendous growth in farmers markets since about 1994. This slide is actually dated. The UAAMS Marketing Services division has more updated numbers, but basically there's just a tremendous increase. So, in 2004 there were 88 markets in Virginia, and now there's well over 200 markets. So it's really just increased significantly in terms of a way for consumers to get their food. And so just to share a little bit of information about foodborne illness, oftentimes a lot of people shop at farmers markets because they view that as a safer place. They get to know the vendor, they get to know where their food's coming from, and those are all really great bets for the consumer. But it's important to know that regardless of where the food comes from, there's still a chance of foodborne illness occurring. And so 1 in 6, it's estimated that 1 in 6 individuals get sick with foodborne illness each year. They're typically from major harmful bacteria. I'm not going to talk about the bacteria specifically much, but there are about 9.4 million episodes that are confirmed of foodborne illness each year, with about 55,000 hospitalizations and 1,300 deaths. So this is a pretty significant issue. Sometimes I hear when I'm working with people that shop at farmers markets or farmers market vendors, it's like, well, there are outbreaks that are traced back to farmers markets. And the reality is that that's not accurate. Well, yes, usually when there's a foodborne outbreak, we get, it's usually large, that is immediate. It's usually from a large company that has had a major recall or major cases of illnesses that have spanned across many states. Sometimes if foodborne illness comes from a farmer's market in one small community, it might even be detected. There have been a few that have been detected, and I'm just going to briefly talk about a couple of these. In 2000, there was an outbreak of E. coli 0157H7 that was linked to produce samples that were offered at a farmer's market in Fort Collins, Colorado. In this specific incident, 14 people became sick, and 2 elementary school-aged children got so sick that they required dialysis. So it can be pretty significant. Oftentimes people think about foodborne illness and they think about, maybe a 2-day illness where you get a little bit of diarrhea, you maybe some vomiting, and it's pretty self-contained. But there can be some very drastic health effects associated with it. And so in this specific case, there were 2 children that needed dialysis. It occurred in 2010, and this was a salmonella outbreak that was linked to guacamole and uncooked tamales that were sold at a farmer's market in East Iowa. In this incident, 44 people got sick and 5 were hospitalized. So again, another example of an outbreak that could happen. I think I'm going to talk about, and this one occurred in 2011. This was, again, E. coli 0157H7 that was linked to strawberries sold from multiple different farm stands and farmers markets across Oregon. In this incident, 12 people got sick, or 12 males and 4 males got sick, 4 were hospitalized, and 2 suffered kidney failure. And this is an example of really a pretty small outbreak that could have devastating effects. And in this particular incident, the outbreak was linked back to a deer that had been on the strawberry farm and had defecated in the fields. So certainly this is a situation where the farmer didn't realize that this was happening, and certainly there was no ill intent associated with it. So the examples of some outbreaks that could happen, and really what this presentation is about is how we can prevent foodborne illness and foodborne outbreaks from happening, which is certainly what farmers market managers want to do related to foods that are sold at their market. And so the most important things are to understand how contamination can occur, understanding what the risks are, and then knowing what you can do to control them. Hopefully I can talk about that a little bit today. And then educating any of your workers or helpers or vendors or anyone that's at the market selling product. Everybody understands what the risks are, and everybody is bought into reducing those risks. Then that really creates a good culture at that market for reducing risk of foodborne illness and increasing food safety. I'd like to couch my presentation is really to talk about the top 5 factors that are associated with foodborne illness outbreaks. And this is linked, these top 5 factors are by the CDC and the FDA. And then, so I'll talk about each of these, and then as I go throughout my presentation, I will talk specifically about each point and that can be, those risks can be controlled at the farmer's market. The top 5 factors that are responsible or associated with foodborne illness outbreaks are 1, poor employee health and hygiene, contaminated utensils and equipment, improper holding temperatures of potentially hazardous foods, temperatures of foods, and sold from unsafe sources. And so I will go through each of these points to talk specifically about how they can be controlled and managed at a farmer's market. So first point, how can we foster good employee health and hygiene at the market? So this is often difficult for farmers markets, and that is to provide restroom facilities. And oftentimes that's difficult because outside markets, they're in the middle of a town square or some sort of area like that where there's not a public restroom facility in close proximity. There'd be some businesses in close proximity that have restrooms, but it's oftentimes there is not a public restroom facility. So I mention this because it really be the best possible situation for there to be a public restroom facility at a market. And this facility would need to be clean, it would need to be separate from other areas, provide adequate toilet paper, and hand washing facilities in close proximity to the restroom. Again, and I didn't mention this before, as I go through these slides, these are sort of recommendations, and certainly each market would need to consider them and utilize what made sense for them. But ideally, the best situation would be that there would be public restroom facilities. And perhaps even more important is to provide hand washing facilities. In this slide, there's a picture of some porta-johns that are out open, and then right next to the porta-john there's a hand washing facility. I don't know if this is an option for any of your markets, but this could possibly be a solution to providing restroom facilities and hand washing facilities. The hand washing facilities should include clean water, paper towels, soap, and a trash can. And as we go through this presentation, I'm going to talk some more about how we can create hand washing facilities that are a little less sophisticated than the one that are seen in this slide, but are just as beneficial. So how would you create a hand washing station? And it's really simple to create a hand washing station. And I'll have some pictures in the slides. I believe that the hand washing station is going to be hands-free, without actually touching any of the components. There is typically what is recommended is that there are 6 components. You can set up a 5-gallon cooler with a free flow spigot, has been cleaned and sanitized, that has a constant flow, and that would allow you to have 2 hand washing. So it can be turned, you could wash your hands underneath it. Then you have soap, cleaner that's in the 5-gallon cooler, paper towels, a can underneath the water flow to collect the wastewater, and then a trash receptacle. And pictures in the next slides. And just a point, talk some more about this in the coming slides, but if you process food at your booth, are required by the health department to have a hand washing station on site. So here are examples of some hand washing stations. So as I mentioned before, if you look to the slide to the left, there's a picture of a 50-gallon drum or a 50-gallon container, and that's just an example in this image, that has valves that can be turned on and have free-flowing water when it's turned on. Underneath that valve, you see there's a bucket to collect the water as the water comes out. And on the bucket, there are paper towels, hand soap, and then inside of the 50-gallon bucket is warm water. That's not necessarily a requirement. And then what's included in that caricature is a trash basin or something to collect the trash. If you look to the pictures on the right of the slide, there are a couple of examples of hand washing stations that have been set up at farmers markets that we took some pictures of. So here we've got, again, just a large water cooler that's full of water with a spigot, collection basin in the bottom, and soap available in order for to wash your hands. These are just some quick examples. Okay. It required at the, I don't know if you said required, but is it required at the market or at the station? Is that the correct, is that was? And the answer to that is depends. So ideally any market would have as a manager, ideally you would set up a hand washing station at your market for people to have available so they could wash hands. This is a good idea for many different reasons. You're out on a hot summer day and someone's selling peaches and they're eating peaches and their hands get sticky. It's always nice to be able to have a place where you can go and wash your hands. So that's just sort of for convenience, not necessarily for safety. So it's not required. It is considered a best practice for a market to have a hand washing station. It is required, and Perry can speak more to this when she gives her presentation. If you are set up at the market, if you have a vendor that's set up that is selling processed foods, that is cooking at the market, they would consider a temporary vendor, and it would be required by the health department that they have a hand washing station set up. So it depends on the vendor. If a vendor is just selling fresh produce, then that would not be a requirement. Another point is to encourage following correct hand washing, and this just sort of talks about what would be correct hand washing. Here we have a little picture that depicts what that would be. So wet hands, rub hands together for 20 seconds, rub the back of the hands, wrists, between fingernails, under fingernails, rinse soap off, towel dry, ideally with a single-use paper towel, and then turn the taps off with a towel if that way you don't cross-contaminate any surfaces. Ideally, and that's why in the previous slides I talked about, ideally that would be hands-free, where maybe you had a foot pedal where you could turn water on and off with a foot pedal. Oftentimes the types of hand washing stations that you rent associated with porta-johns have those foot pedals, but certainly that's not a requirement. And the other point that I'm going to make is about hand sanitizer, because oftentimes people think that hand sanitizer is as effective as hand washing. And we know from scientific studies that that is not the case. Hand sanitizer is great, and if you've got nothing else, then that is certainly better than nothing. But there's nothing that is better than the good old-fashioned hand washing where you scrub your hands. It has been shown that the actual scrubbing of your hands and that action is what assists in moving microorganisms from your hands better. And then the hand sanitizer, certainly if your hands are dirty and then you put hand sanitizer on your hands, you're really not doing any good. So the sanitizer is more ideally used when you have clean hands to start with. So that's just a recommendation there. This slide in here just to encourage that if you have hand washing station set up, that you may use signage in order to encourage folks to wash their hands properly. And I put this in here because this is a publication that we have with Virginia Cooperative Extension I created, and we have a large number of these that are laminated and available through Virginia Cooperative Extension. So you can contact me, or you can contact your local extension agent or Meredith, and we can get copies of the laminated hand washing signs if something that would make sense to you and be helpful at your market. When should someone wash their hands? And it's basically all the time. Before starting work, after absence from a booth, when you're, when you've taken a break, after restroom use, after smoking, drinking, eating, after sneezing or blowing your nose, after touching your face, after coughing, after touching a sore, after handling money, after handling fresh produce, after taking out the trash, really after any activity that may have caused contamination. So when you're at a farmer's market and you're serving food to the public, it's probably good practice to have a pretty regular hand washing routine. And just about money handling. Oftentimes, people talk about money being a really big source of contamination. It's really not as big of a problem as people think. That sort of has supported that. People have done studies on how dirty paper is and whether it can transmit foodborne illness. And so really it's not a big risk. However, oftentimes patrons and consumers at the market would see someone handling money and then handling food and find that to be an offensive practice. And so it's good to sort of have, when after you're handling money, to use washing in between. A point that's really important is that vendors at the market should minimize bare hand contact. This can be done with gloves, tongs, spoons, hand papers, any of those types of things. But it's really important to note that this is not a substitute for hand washing. Rather, it is helpful for avoiding bare hand contact with food. Gloves is capable of spreading germs as contaminated hands. So oftentimes, the food handler will put gloves on and think, okay, everyone's protected. I've got gloves on. But then they change their gloves, or they never take them off and wash hands and then put new gloves on. They never really consider that the gloves that they have on have become contaminated and can also spread germs. So it's really important to create that type of culture at the market. Gloves and gloves used single tasks and discarded, and that's the same with hand papers and those types of things. And then, it's important to make sure that your vendors bring enough to the market. And it might be a good practice for a market manager to have extra ones on hand just in case. Other thing it's important to have a sick worker policy. And this is really tricky and really hard for even for restaurants and food service operations, because basically for most folks, if they don't come to work, then they don't get paid. They don't make make a living. And it's really important when you're dealing with food that people experiencing vomiting, nausea, diarrhea, jaundice, any of those types of symptoms need to be kept away from food and food contact surfaces for at least 24 hours after the symptoms have stopped. This is because vomiting, nausea, diarrhea, and jaundice are symptoms that are associated very rarely with foodborne illness. And someone is experiencing those symptoms, they can transfer the food contagion to the food or for surfaces that they're touching. Types of symptoms like sore throat or fever that come without vomiting, nausea, diarrhea, without those other types of symptoms, you all want to exclude from working with food, but it's not as important that be away from food contact surfaces or kept away from the entire operation. Oftentimes, it's recommended if someone has those types of symptoms that they begin another task at a restaurant or another task associated with the business that's not specifically working with food. Important to treat open wounds properly. Not handle food if you have a sore that contains pus or infected. Cover affected area with bandage, finger, and then use a single-use glove. So as a market manager, it might be a practice, or some might want to consider, is to have a first aid kit at the market, so that way if something happens, you're able to attend to your vendor and get any cut attended to correctly so that it can't transfer any contamination to the food. Ideally, a vendor would have their own ways to handle that, but a market manager might want to include that as well. Okay, next risk factor, and that is dirty. That risk factor is dirty and contaminated equipment. And so the next set of slides is going to talk about ways to clean and or prevent contamination of utensils and equipment at the market. Important as we talk about the procedures in the next few slides to talk about the difference between cleaning and sanitizing, because they're two separate things. Cleaning removes the dirt, and we do with soap and water. So if your hands are dirty and you're washing your hands, you're cleaning the dirt off of your hands. And the next step would be for sanitizing, and it's what is going to actually reduce the microorganisms to safe levels. So I used an example as hands, but if you're talking about food utensils, let's say you have a spoon that's been used to serve a soup. If you clean that spoon with soap and water, you're removing the dirt, but that cleaning is not removing the microorganisms necessarily, at least not to what are considered safe levels. So then you need a step where you sanitize, and that will reduce the microorganisms. As a it is a very good idea to be prepared with an effective sanitizer at the market that you can use to sanitize the surfaces before and after and then during, if needed, sale of food. An expensive sanitizer is just bleach. Get 1 tablespoon of just basic chlorine bleach, and it's important that this be just the regular strength chlorine, not the extra strength, because you can buy there's all sorts of different types of bleach you can in the store, and you just want to buy just the basic generic bleach per gallon of water. And then make up fresh spray bottles daily. So here's a picture of an easy spray bottle you can buy at Home Depot or Walmart, and make up your sanitizer before you go to the market as a vendor. If you're preparing food at the market or serving food at the market, you would need to have a basin where you soak or sanitize utensils. And ideally, you want to soak or sanitize those utensils in a bleach solution for 1 minute. Another way that you could do it is have a solution make and apply it to paper towels or clean cloths and wipe surfaces that way. There's multiple different ways that you can do that. So I mentioned about the sanitizing, one thing, if you are serving food at the market, that is a requirement, is that you have a 3-compartment sink or three separate bins to wash your equipment utensils while you're at the market. So I see there's 3 bins because the first bin you wash and you remove the dirt. The second bin you rinse, and the third bin contains a sanitizer that you would then dip the utensil in to sanitize it when you're done. So one of the most important things to know is if you're serving food at the market, the Virginia Department of Health would like for you to have a 3-compartment sink on site at your vendor site, vendor booth, so you can wash, rinse, and sanitize your utensils at the market. Important things are to prevent cross-contamination at the market. As a vendor, one of the big recommendations that we have that's often gets a lot of kickback, and I totally understand why, is to exclude animals. But I understand that's very difficult because some of the culture at the market is for people to bring dogs on a Saturday morning, and so I certainly understand why that would be a challenge for a market manager. But some markets have decided to exclude animals just because as a vendor that's selling a product at the market, if you have a patron walk up with a dog that then licks the table or grabs a food product off the table, that certainly creates a less than ideal situation. So animal exclusion is recommended as a key method to prevent cross-contamination. In the picture, this is a picture of a farmer's market in another state, and here you've got a picture of mom and her son at the market on a Saturday morning, and you look in the back, and there is a bunch of food on a food prep table, and there's a couple cats sitting on it. So this is certainly less than ideal situation for the market for preventing cross-contamination. You encourage your vendors to regularly clean and sanitize any of their display items or food contact surfaces. Any contact that's going to come in contact with the food, it's essential to make sure that it's cleaned and sanitized regularly. It would be good to cover or package food. If you sell the food, then that reduces the risk at the market. And if you're preparing food at the market, it's important to separate any raw product, which would be considered high-risk food, from a ready-to-eat food. For example, if you're a vendor selling prepared foods, and maybe you're cooking burgers, and you have on one side of your booth you have raw meat that you're working with, you want to make sure that raw meat that you're working with and cooking those burgers doesn't come in contact with anything that's ready to eat at that booth as well. Cuttings and all other utensils are essential to being clean, sanitized. So I've said already, sanitize all food contact surfaces. If you use a cutting board, place it on a sanitized surface. Make sure it's been cleaned and sanitized, because that'd be a key reservoir for contamination. It's essential any of those surfaces, if you're working with any foods that are going to be cooked or that are high-risk foods, that those areas or those surfaces get cleaned before they come in contact with something that's ready to eat. As an example, don't use the same cutting board for cutting raw foods and ready-to-eat foods, and then always clean and sanitize in between use with different foods. Food at the market. The best ideal way for you to store your food at the market is to only use food-grade containers that are easy to clean and sanitize. So be plastic or metal. Don't bags. Oftentimes people don't realize that garbage bags and other bags like that are sold for trash purposes, they're not considered food grade, and they're treated with mold inhibiting compounds. So there are chemicals inside of those bags that should not come in contact with food. And grocery bags, but they may have come in contact with food previously stored and also could transmit contagion. So here's an example in this picture of some stainless steel bins that are being used to sell potatoes at a market, and this is really ideal because stainless steel is very easily cleaned, and so you can sanitize, put the potato in for sale, have them sold and then clean and sanitize when it's done, and that's a very safe and easy way to sell product. Here's storage of food at the market. It's essential to keep your food items and containers off of the ground. The recommendation is that they're at least 6 inches off of the ground. Do not use baskets, cardboard, or wooden boxes. In the picture that you see on the bottom, there's lots of problems with those pictures. The food's being displayed in wood boxes and then also being stored on the ground. So ideally, these would be kept up off the ground, and they would be in a container or some type of a container that is easily sanitizable. Baskets, cardboard, and wood are not easily sanitized. You see that this person has burlap sacks that are sort of used to display some of the products, and that looks kind of cool, and it looks like a great display, but from a food safety standpoint, there are better ways to display your food. In this second picture, you see you've got some on the floor that's in boxes, and then the product that's being sold up on the table, which is a very nice display, is in baskets, and again, baskets are not easily sanitized. So the best practice in these situations would be, if you want baskets, that's great, but to maybe take some cloth or dish towels or something like that to set baskets and put the product on top of, and then those cloths or other displays can then be taken home and washed in between use. And so that would be the ideal to display those types of products at the market. I'm getting into considerations for vendors that are processing foods at the market, and certainly a representative from VDH can speak much more clearly to this when speaks. But serving food in general, if you're serving food to the public to consume immediately, so this could be cookies, muffins, things that are open in the air, or if you're processing at the market, if you're cooking burgers or anything like that, omelets in the morning at the market, any type of procedure where you're altering the original state of the food, so it could be cooking, chopping, mixing, grinding, cutting, drying, smoking, any of those things that you're doing at the market, you are considered someone that is processing the food at the market. And so if you're processing food at the market, then you would fall under regulation by the Virginia Department of Health, and you would be considered a temporary food vendor. Need to file a temporary food vendor permit with the local health department. And again, they can speak more to this when they talk about regulations in the next hour. In serving foods prepared on site, if you're processing at the market, you must have an on-site warewashing 3-compartment sink that has sanitizing solution and test strips to test the sanitizing solution. So I've spoken in previous slides about how to set up a 3-compartment sink at the market. Using that 3 plastic basin method is considered an adequate way. You just got to make sure you have an appropriate, correctly mixed up sanitizing solution for sanitizing. You must have an on-site hand washing station. Again, in previous slides, I've showed some examples of how to set up an on-site hand washing station. You must have overhead protection. That would be a tent or a canopy, which most markets have. The foods must be stored in a dry location. Slicing must be done on a cutting board, and all TS foods, and I'm going to talk about what those are in a few minutes, must be kept above 135 degrees Fahrenheit or below 41 degrees Fahrenheit. They must be either kept hot for hot holding or cold for cold holding. So I'll talk about point number 6 in the coming slides. To talk a little bit about samples, because samples are often a big thing at farmers markets, it's really important for consideration to have vendors consider when they offer samples to offer them in single-use containers in a situation where they're not going to actually be touching the food. So here's some examples of some samples that have been offered at farmers markets. Here at the top, we've got a bunch of different types of pickles, and this display has toothpicks where the consumer can come and take a toothpick and pick it up, and they're not actually touching the food. So that's a good example. In the next picture, if we're going sort of clockwise, in the next picture, you've got a picture of someone serving some fruit slices, and in this situation, they're in covered plastic bins with tongs. And so it's actually touching the product. Next example, again, there's some chocolate or fudge samples that are served on a paper plate that have a toothpick into them so no one has to touch the food. Bottom, there's someone who has a salsa or some sort of a salad that's in single-use containers with single-use little spoons. So again, this is a good way to serve samples where nobody's touching the product. And then in the last example here, you all have little single-use container, little single-use cups where people can grab the samples. So these are some good examples. I would say probably a better example would be something that you can and to the market already. So if you had little containers with lids, you prepared at home with salsa or whatever you were going to put in them, and then snap it on and put them in cold storage, that would be an even more ideal way to offer a sample at the market. And most of these things I've really talked about are best practices for offering samples at the market, include providing single-serve sizes, being at home before coming to market, using temperature control, keeping the product covered, and providing single-use utensils for someone to take the item without having to touch it. This next slide, I'll show some bad examples. And here are some examples of just some berries where someone's serving some berries at the market, and they just set some out for people to take paper plates. And so here you've got people coming by and taking a handful of blueberries or taking a strawberry. And so this is certainly an avenue where cross-contamination could occur, where you've got somebody with dirty hands that's grabbing some food off of the container or off of the display. Is the example to the bottom left, where you got a couple apples that are sitting there and a knife. So if anyone wants to take a taste of the apple, they can come and cut it off themselves. And this causes all sorts of risks, which include injury. You've got kids at the market. Kid could grab the knife. Then you've also got food safety concerns where you've got lots of people handling that apple and cutting a slice off to try it. So this would be considered a risky or a bad sample setup at a farmer's market. Next point that we're going to cover, and I'm going to check on time. Okay, we're going on to the next point that we're going to cover, which is how to properly maintain temperatures of hot or cold, potentially hazardous foods at the market. And I'm going to talk about what those are and what those. So in a couple of ago, I talked about Virginia Department of Health regulation being that hot foods need to be kept hot and cold foods need to be kept cold. What that means is that foods that are hot need to be kept above 135 degrees Fahrenheit, and foods that are cold need to be kept below 41 degrees Fahrenheit. So foods to consider. And you've heard me use the term potentially hazardous foods, which is not a term that's used as much anymore, and they're often called instead now TCS foods. I've also used that word. These can be used interchangeably. So TCS foods, which would be are foods that require time and temperature control for safety. That's time, temperature control for safety. So that's what the TCS stands for. This is any food that needs to be held at a specific temperature over time. Usually you think about foods that need to be kept in the refrigerator. Some of these are obvious, but some may be surprising. So examples of some of these types of foods that require time and temperature control are raw or heat-treated meats, raw shell eggs, heat vegetables, cut juice. So that oftentimes is one of the ones that baffles people. So anytime you have an intact melon, for example, that is not a TCS food. That can be held at room temperature for an indeterminate amount of time. Once you cut that melon into cubes, that now needs to be held at refrigeration temperatures. And this is because we know that foodborne pathogens can grow very readily on melon flesh. The same is for leafy greens, tomatoes, seed sprouts, and a number of other types of cut produce. So once you cut an intact product and you've got juicy flesh from the inside of the food, oftentimes foodborne pathogens like to grow in those surfaces. Food contains any of the above, so any mixed foods that contain any of the things that I've just mentioned. In oil mixtures that have not been acidified must be kept under refrigeration conditions, and this is because there is a risk for botulism. And custard and cream-filled pies, cheesecakes, those types of baked goods. Generally, most baked goods can be held at room temperature, but if there are custard or cream fillings in those are considered potentially hazardous or TCS foods that need to be held under refrigeration. You control temperature. So we know that temperature is the greatest factor that contributes to foodborne illness. And this is because if food is held in the temperature danger zone, and that is between 41 degrees Fahrenheit and 135 degrees Fahrenheit, those temperatures in that danger zone encourage replication of food pathogens. And so it's recommended that you keep your hot foods hot, and that is above 135 degrees Fahrenheit, as I've mentioned, and you keep cold foods cold below 41 degrees Fahrenheit. And foods that have been held in the temperature danger zone, it is recommended that they be discarded after 2 hours held out, especially if they're held out on a summer day. And if it's a hot summer day, that can be reduced to just 1 hour. So if you got a 90-degree humid day, the amount of time in the temperature danger zone is shorter. And really important to use an accurate thermometer. And it's important because the inspector, if you're inspected, the inspector will have a thermometer to come and check and make sure that you're holding your hot foods hot and your cold foods cold. So keep your foods cold at the market. Lots of different ways that you can do it. Oftentimes in a market, the best way to do it is with coolers with an adequate amount of ice. With adequate amount of ice means that there's enough ice to cover the product or the surface and the sides of the product. That is what is not considered adequate would be a cooler that didn't have ice in it, that was just holding, something that had just come out of the refrigerator. It would have to have ice to hold that temperature. And just one layer of ice at the bottom is not considered effective enough. You have to have enough ice to adequately surround the product. Use ice as a display. So you could, as an example in this picture, this person is displaying cut watermelon and cut cantaloupe on ice. So that could be used, although probably not as realistic on a hot summer day. And then you can use refrigeration. Ideally, that's the best case, but most markets don't have power. So it's understood that oftentimes people are using coolers with ice. So that's really considered the best way to manage it at the market. And it's really important also to have a thermometer so that you can ensure that those foods are being kept at appropriate temperatures. Here's examples of some foods that are kept on ice. Make sure that the ice has been made from potable water. That's really important. You can also use cold packs, which are more economical. Will keep the foods from becoming wet or soft, but you have to have an adequate amount of cold packs to cover around the food in order to keep it at the appropriate temperature. And then again, and this is also links back to that potable water comment, the ice that's used for keeping food cold should be served for human consumption. So if you have a or a food that of beef as an example in this other picture, if you've got a cooler of beef that's packaged, you should not have children coming around and taking ice out of that cooler to consume on a hot summer day. Okay, the next couple of points are much shorter, basically dealing with cooking foods to the proper temperature for safety, and this is primarily for folks that are going to be processing at the market. So if you're cooking food at the market, it's essential to use a calibrated food thermometer and to cook foods to the correct temperature. This table here will show what the correct temperature for a number of food products are. Poultry, including ground chicken and turkey, must be cooked to 165 degrees Fahrenheit. Stuffing or stuffed foods or casseroles up to 165. Ground meat, like ground beef and eggs, cooked to 160. Pork, veal, and lamb cooked to 145 degrees with a 3-minute rest time, although that's probably not as realistic for what's going to be served in a market. And fish needs to be cooked to 145 degrees Fahrenheit. The point is preventing foods from unsafe sources from being sold at the market. And this is really important for market managers in knowing what those unsafe food sources are and making sure that the vendors at your market are selling foods that are from safe sources. What this means is that they're serving foods that were produced and prepared following federal and state regulations. Regulations is sort of the overall umbrella, but really it's following the state regulations. Most of the foods that are sold at farmers markets are regulated by the Virginia Department of Ag and Consumer Services, and these are mainly products that have been prepared somewhere else and brought to the market to be packaged and then brought to the market to be sold. Items are not allowed to be sold are raw milk at the market, and that's a state regulation, and low-acid canned foods, and this is a state and federal regulation. So if you have, and this is something that's come up in Virginia, but both of them have, but I have specific experience with low-acid canned foods, where someone was preparing stews and soups that are low acid. Those are considered a much higher risk product, canning them at home in their kitchen and then selling them at the market. And it's illegal. So understanding as a market manager, understanding what products should not be sold at all. And that the foods that are being sold at the market are from safe sources that are either produced or processed in a safe manner. And so what's important here is really just knowing your vendors and knowing that they're following state regulations. If they need to, if they for the cottage food law, if they need to have any type of permits or things like that, making sure that they have met those requirements. And if they don't need to, if they're selling an exempt product, making sure that their product is labeled that their product was produced without inspection. And so there's some important considerations for a farmer's market. Sure. So basically, this is my last slide, just to sort of home everything. So everything I've talked about today really links back to these key concepts, which is that prevention of food outbreaks translate to proper cleaning and sanitation, cross-contamination, and making that you're adequately controlling temperature. And with that, I don't know if there were any questions that popped up while I was talking, but I had to take any questions at this point.
Things get skeeved out.
Oh, it's not scary. It's not scary.
I was like, but I sometimes do put cheese in a garbage bag. Not in a garbage
bag. No, don't in a garbage bag.
In a grocery bag.
Oh, well.
But I'll stop doing that for you. Does anyone have any questions? I know lots. We are recording it so you can watch it again.
Yeah, and if I can make one more comment, Meredith, and I don't know if you provide this for them, but we have the Going to Market publication that we update very rarely. In fact, I just updated it a couple months ago.
Okay.
And that provides sort of a very broad overview of regulations for a variety of different products that can be sold to the public. So that's certainly very useful for market managers to use.
I'm going to put the link to it in the chat box.
That I thought might be helpful to do. Thank you. And that's just been updated.
Awesome. Yes. Yeah. Okay, I'll put that there.
And I don't know if Perry can speak to it. I know that in the last 2 years or so, the way that markets have been regulated in terms of the relationship between VDAX and VH and who does what has changed some. And so that Going to Market publication, as it's sort of spit out and has passed through all the ranks of VDH to make sure we've got the right language in it. But if Perry wants to talk more to that would be good as well. And maybe that's probably what they're planning on talking about anyway. But
yeah. I muted a call-in user that doesn't have a name. Was that you?
Hey, it's Lisa.
Lisa.
Yeah. I'll unmute both of my call-in users. So, Perry, you able to?
Yeah, Meredith, I'm on. So
okay, great. Okay, so both Lisa are unmuted if either of you want to jump in.
Okay.
And then we can give time to
Okay,
Perry.
Lisa, did you have anything you wanted to cover before I go?
Yeah, I'm just listening and provide support if anybody has any questions.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm Perry Pearson. I'm the State Food Safety Consultant with Virginia Department of Health. And Meredith asked me to talk with you all about kind of the VH role and then expectations at the market. And I'd like to just start off by saying that Dr. Boyer definitely covered our expectations very thoroughly. If there's a few things that I would, I'll discuss anything that needs further clarification, but I'm not going to go back through everything that she has already covered with you all. If you follow her advice, you'll be in very good shape. So I'll start off by just talking about the farmers market, the memorandum of understanding that we have with Virginia Department of Agriculture related to food vendor operations at farmers markets and other gatherings. This document is on our website, so I can send a link if you guys want that. It's pretty simple. It's just www.vdh, like Virginia Department of Health, Virginia spelled out, .gov. Actually, if you just Google Virginia Department of Health, it'll take you to our webpage. And you can find information under the Environmental Health Services portion of the programs in VDH. But so the whole memorandum of understanding is in the webpage. What I want to talk with you about in that memorandum is what we call the procedural agreement. It kind of defines when VDAX regulates the vendor and when VDH regulates the vendor. Vendors that are offering primarily packaged foods or samples of those packaged foods that are produced under VDAX inspection or exempt from VDAX inspection, those are not going to be inspected by VDH. So if you're making bread at home and you're taking it to the market to sell and you open a package of your bread and offer some sample of that, VDH is not going to permit or inspect that activity. Also, vendors offering products
produced under the inspection of another entity with jurisdiction over the product or plant will not be inspected by VDH. And finally, if you produce the product on your own farm, you sell that to the ultimate end-use consumer for their own personal use, and VDH will not inspect that. It's kind of 4 primary areas where we're not going to be involved at all, and I'll just go through those briefly again just to ensure it is clear. So this offering primarily packaged food products or samples of those products. Number 1, produced under VDAC's inspection. Number 2, exempt from VDAC's inspection. 3, produced under the inspection of another entity with jurisdiction over the product or plant. Number 4, produced on their own farms and sold to consumers for their own personal use. Examples of things that VDH is not going to regulate at the farmers market. Well, there are some things that we would regulate, and examples of these are, I'm reading this to you from our webpage, so you can find this exact wording on our website. Examples of food operations that farmers markets could require, sold farmers markets that could require a VDH temporary food establishment permit include those who serve or vend more than a simple offering of a food produced at a manufacturing plant subject to jurisdictional agency inspection. So if you're offering more than what would customarily be to as a sample, that would require a permit. 2 is vendors who would otherwise be exempt from a permit under Code of Virginia 35.1-14 because they're selling their own farm-produced products, yet are supplementing these products with food obtained from an otherwise approved source. So if you are selling beef in the form of a hamburger that used on your own farm, we would not regulate that. But you add other products to that beef and sell it in another form as like a burger or something like that, then that would potentially need a permit. And third example that we give is that vendors who want to cook and serve any foods on site that are outside of those specifically produced on their own farm. So you would meet with the requirements for getting a permit. You should apply at least 10 days prior to the event to give our inspectors time to review the application, back to you with any questions or concerns that they have about what you're proposing. And then in order to issue that permit, we have to do a pre-operational inspection, and that's usually just done the first day that you operate at the site, and we'll be looking for, that Dr. Boyer pointed out in her presentation. So, would then issue the permit. And if you're going to be operating more once a year, you can apply for a permit that will cover up to 12 months of operation. But we're a temporary food establishment, only operates, in conjunction with a special event and no more than 14 consecutive days. Okay, so I think I would ask if anybody has any questions about that information before I move on.
I have one question in the chat box. Can I read it to you?
Oh, certainly.
Okay,
So I don't
it's a little long, so strap in. Okay. So we have a question about the whole cottage industry home baking thing. I know what Market says about the cottage industry home baking from an uninspected kitchen, that the label must include not for resale, made in an uninspected kitchen, etc. But our local VDH representative says all food must come from an inspected kitchen, period. So, can the city make rules more strict than what is needed in going to market?
If there's a local ordinance that addresses that, I can't speak to that.
Okay.
Under the state requirements, that's what we are referring to when we say exempt from VDH inspection or produced under exempt from VDAX inspection or produced under VDAX inspection. So there are certain items that are exempt from VDAX inspection, and those home-baked goods in specific categories are included in that. So if you choose to be exempt from VDAX inspection, you only sell from your home or a farmer's market. So that is a case where you can sell something that we otherwise would not permit that. But you were selling that homemade product at a food establishment that we had to inspect because of other things you were doing, we recognize that that is allowed at that venue, where we wouldn't allow that at another food establishment.
So saying that some cities or counties or whatever might have additional laws beyond what this state MOU is stating.
Yes, localities can have more stringent requirements than the state requirements. We are setting the minimum standard.
Okay. Got it.
Yes.
Ms. Lee, did that answer your question? Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions for Perry?
Here, Perry, this is Lisa.
Okay.
We will just repeat it again, just so I want to make sure I'm clear because I'm not sure I understood correctly. The temporary food establishment permit, what I had thought was that it is good for longer than 10 days. Is that
a temporary food establishment permit may be issued for up to 12 months.
yes?
So you apply, you need to apply for the period of time that is to your establishment. And if you would make a mistake, like if you would say, oh, I'm only going to do this, for the month of July, I'm just going to apply for 3 farmers markets during July, and that's what I put on my application. You can still apply for another permit later on, and you will not be charged another fee. The fee is an annual fee. So you can add on. It's just at that point they would have to do another pre-operational inspection. And I just should also point out that if we do a temporary food establishment permit that is for more than just the event, we categorize your facility based on the processes that you're proposing to use, like what types of preparation you're posing, and based on that risk will determine an inspection frequency for the remaining operational period of your permit. So you may not get inspected each thing that you operate at, but you could get inspected, So there's some issues with that.
So, well, in reality, I think, I know a lot of vendors that have temporary food establishment permits, and that permits them to go anywhere in the state. I mean, they technically use that same permit to go anywhere. They don't have
they could, but if they weren't, right.
Correct.
Yes, but if they're not operating in conjunction with a farmer's market, the source issue would come back into play. So then they could not offer those things that they're making in their exempt VDAX kitchen. But yes, they would have a valid temporary food event permit, or a step permit, I'm sorry. Yeah, correct. Yeah.
So if a vendor wanted to do a temporary food establishment permit, and they regularly go to 2 different farmers markets a week for 6 weeks each, they want one permit and both locations and get more than one inspection.
There's one application for their establishment, and they could operate at both locations, and they would be inspected before the permit was issued, and then at some frequency throughout the operational period.
Okay. Question.
Great. Okay, else before I move on?
Someone commenting on the going to market question. They wish better address prepared foods that are prepared in an inspected kitchen and brought to the market in a closed container that is never opened at the market, such as a cheese spread, hummus, or prepared salads. Things always in a closed container. It only addresses things being prepped or cooked on site.
I think what you're describing there is like more of just selling their good. I mean, that would definitely not be regulated by us. If they're just marketing the product that they made in their inspected kitchen, that's not something we permit.
Okay, as long.
Mary,
go ahead.
No, I just wanted to sort of chime in. I would love to get that comment because to improve that, we'd love to do so.
I'll let it to you.
Okay. And if that person wants to elaborate any more, that'd be great too.
See her on it.
That's okay. We want to make it as user friendly as possible. So.
Send it to you right now.
I'm assuming you're talking about a product that comes from a VDAX inspected facility. And that product is under VDAX inspection, and in its container at the farmer's market, we do not inspect that or regulate it. I mean, we might look at it to see what it is. I mean, like sometimes we're interested in what's out there. But, we eat too.
You do?
We do. We grow our own food, and we might even participate in a farmer's market or two. Who knows?
And this is Renee. I just want to comment that the product as it was described sounds to me like that would have to come from an inspected kitchen that Max would regulate.
It would not be an exempt product.
Right,
you're right.
Right. So I think what I'll look at I just see how that in the going to market publication that absolutely would have to fall under VDAX inspection.
Cool. I'm saying some products are from VDH inspected kitchens, and then they also have vendors who have brick and mortar restaurants, etc.
Yeah, they're running into somebody, a health district that's giving you other information. I mean, you can reach out to our office and we'll contact them and clear up any misunderstandings. I mean, we have 300 inspectors out there, and things are wonky from time to time.
Right.
So we'll clear it up. Well, I'm going to go ahead then and just address a couple other things, and I certainly welcome your questions. So I'd like to have, they're cleared between all of us, at the end of this. So, feel free to ask any questions as we go. So I just want to remind everybody that the goal when VDH is permitting and inspecting food establishments, our goal is to prevent foodborne illness. that protects you. You know, protects your market. It protects your vendors. Our goal isn't really to make life as difficult and, you know, try to make it possible for you to do, you know, to sell products. We do want to make sure we're preventing foodborne illness from happening. And, you know, Dr. Boyer did a great job with, you know, sending you with some numbers and information you can go back and look at. I just would like to add that since I started in this, you know, a long time ago, food illness has really shifted gears. It started, most of foodborne illness was occurring because of contaminated foods, things that were not being properly, you know, their proper time and temperature controls. And that was, we saw a lot of salmonella because we knew salmonella could grow in these products, and that was the primary culprit. But it's changed, and now the primary foodborne illnesses are caused by, predominant foodborne illnesses are caused by employees contaminating the food. And whether this is a worker that came to work ill and inadvertently contaminated the food, or they contaminated their hands by touching things and food. There's many ways that this happens, but you know, the employees are a frequent source of the contamination now. And another important thing to remember as far as foodborne illness is that time and temperature does control the risk of pathogens that grow in food. It does not control food that's contaminated by viruses or even some of the pathogens that you just really need to ingest very few of them in order to become ill. And those would include things like E. coli that Dr. Boyer talked about, a couple outbreaks that had occurred from E. coli, as well as things shigellosis, which most people aren't that familiar with that food illness, but it's often referred to as dysentery. It causes a watery diarrhea, and it's becoming more common in the United States, and it can be associated with flies contaminating food or employee hands contaminating food. So that would just really re-emphasize the need for a worker who's ill to not work that day. If you are required to have a VDH permit, then there are things that, in addition to the things that Dr. Boyer already pointed out, that I just would want to bring to your attention. And the first one is the regulations have a requirement that there is a person in charge at each food establishment. So, you know, if you leave your booth and somebody else in charge, they are the person in charge. And they need to know and understand the safety requirements for whatever processes you're doing at that booth. And so that's kind of basic, but often, you know, end up walking up to a booth or something, ask who's in charge. Oh, she went to, you know, this or that or the other thing, and it's like, well, who's in charge, you know? So somebody needs to always be in charge that's at the booth.
Perry, can I ask you a question about that? This is Renee.
Certainly.
I understand that recently the food code has changed. Well, I guess maybe that there must be a certified food manager on site. Is that?
Okay, yeah, that's on my list.
Okay.
Yeah, let me come up to that. That's the thing after next, okay?
Okay.
Okay, then if you still have questions, let's go through it then. Yeah, so the next thing I had is I just wanted to bring up the, Dr. had said we need a sick worker policy, and that is correct. So there's an environmental health policy. I'm going to send some links to Meredith that she can send out to you guys on, that includes the Environmental Health Services Guide to Employee Health. It is on the webpage, so if you go to our webpage, you will find it there. But I know a lot of times you don't really have a time to get back and do these kinds of things. So if she sends you the links, it will be more convenient for you. As far as an employee health policy goes, or sick worker policy, you are to have a verifiable means that your employees have been trained on illness reporting requirements. So if you have employees, you will need to have documentation that you did a training with them, that maybe they sign that documentation, or you could have one of the forms that's in that guide signed by them. It's just going to list the symptoms that they have to report to you, illnesses that if they're diagnosed by a physician that they have to report to you. And the guide also talks about, we need to exclude or restrict an employee from working, what types of exposure to foodborne illness might be a concern, and then which employees could return to work. So that it's pretty comprehensive, and ever in a situation and you're not sure what to do, you can call the health department and ask them. They will walk you through it. It's not, that's completely acceptable. If our EH staff aren't in office to answer your questions, there are lots of nurses that should be able to address it as well. Okay, and next up is the demonstration of knowledge piece. So we do expect the person in charge to demonstrate knowledge of food safety principles and practices related to what they're doing, the type of procedures they're doing in their establishment. So if you are, simply doing one process, we don't expect you to know every single other thing that's in the regulations. We want you to know what's required for the processes that you are doing. But we do require, now there is a new requirement that goes into effect July 1st of this year, that in food establishment, a temporary food establishment is just a type of food establishment. So they are required to have a certified food protection manager employed who and is somebody who either has management or supervisory duties and can direct the activities of the employees. So there are 5 accredited providers of that certification. They are all listed on our website. Some of them offer complete online training where you can take the class if you need to, and or the test at your home if you have computer equipment that meets their requirements. So they enter it via webcam. And then there's classes that you can do that are offered in various communities. And I know that there's been some issues with availability of those classes. We are certainly that we will be working with people as they, into compliance with that requirement. Okay, so do you guys have questions on either of those things?
Questions on that? So, that's like someone whose main egg sandwiches at the farmer's market needs to have that.
Yeah, cooking from raw, they would need to have a certified food protection manager, unless all they're doing is cooking their own farm-produced egg and serving that.
Right.
A sample of it, yes, because they're going to, fall through that exemption.
That manager need to be on site all the time?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, it's the same for our food establishments. So, I mean, if you're cooking that egg at a fast food restaurant, they just have to be able to, it's to ensure that the employees that are doing that are trained, that they know the safety requirements and how to control the various risks associated with their process. So you do not have to be there at all times. Other questions?
This is Lee again. If anybody needs to have their certified food protection manager, you can talk to me because I teach that.
Jana's saying, I thought they could only serve their cooked product at their own farm, but no, that's at the farmer's market. She's saying beef vendor can cook his beef at the market without inspection.
Yes.
So beef vendor takes the ground meat and makes it into patties and puts it on a bun and sells it as a hamburger. Is that different?
Value added for service. At that point, it would fall to VDH relation.
But it's doing a sample.
Right. If he's just doing a sample of his beef, we're not, we're going to regulate that. That's on that procedural agreement.
Patty.
I don't care if he makes it into a patty and offers it as a sample, but if he adds value to it by adding other products that aren't his farm-produced products, then he would no longer be under that exemption.
Anything at all being added to that beef, probably.
Well, we're not going to go off the deep end on that. But, we're not like looking for these things. The bottom line is that a VDH permit protects. It's a permit to operate. It's a form of protection for the person that's operating a food service establishment. If you fall in the category of food establishment, you apply for that permit. If you fall under that procedural agreement, then we're not going to issue a permit for that type of facility. So we want you to, the idea is you should be able to offer a sample of the food that you prepare, but once you start changing that into another thing, at that point it would be regulated.
Right. Okay. Got you.
Yeah. But that's not to say they can't dip that beef patty into some Heinz ketchup and eat it. I'm not going to go there.
Got you.
So, okay. Okay, we're going to move on, and I'm happy to come back to any if you think of other questions as we go, then I'm happy to come back to that.
Okay.
So I think Dr. Boyer definitely covered what we look for as far as a setup at, if you are doing preparation and have need a VDH permit, we want to see hand washing facilities, and what she described is, great and fine. We're good with that. We don't accept the hand sanitizer in place of hand washing. The same like with the requirements for wash, rinse, and sanitize. You do need a means of cleaning your utensils and foods. And you are, setting up, like she demonstrated, you can use like the dish pans that are filled with, salty water, plain water, and the proper concentration of bleach water. That was great. To talk about cooking, so one thing that I would just bring up as far as cooking goes is I think she addressed eggs for immediate consumption, like this example you gave me a few minutes ago, the guy cooking, like serving an egg biscuit or egg sandwich. If he's cooking egg for immediate service, the cooking temperature is actually 145 degrees. So if he's making the egg in response to a customer order and cooking it and serving it, they can serve it at a little lower temperature, so 145. But if they are cooking and offering that egg undercooked, like less than 145 degrees, that would be anything sunny side up or over easy, would need to have a consumer advisory, and they can simply write out the statement, consuming raw or, like sunny side up or over easy eggs are not fully cooked. Consuming raw or undercooked eggs may increase your risk of foodborne illness. It's all in our regulations. It's easy to find that information on our website if you need any further on that. And the same would go if they're cooking any kind of meats or things like that. If they cook it under the required temperature, then they have to have a consumer advisory. And we certainly do want to see the use of that thermometer on site. So, Dr. Lear brought up that they needed a thermometer. Yes, they do need it, but we want to see them use it too.
Just keeping it around doesn't work.
Hanging out in the control of the car isn't gonna do it. So let's see. She also brought up the concern about animals, and I would like to just really bring that up again, because I've been to many farmers markets. I know there's a lot of animals around. They're not usually up around the food, but I've seen them around the food a few times. But also keep in mind what your customers are doing. They're often petting these animals and then coming up and touching your food. So the more hand-washing facilities you have, maybe signs reminding people that if they touch an animal that they should wash their hands before they touch food, any of those things would be useful tools. Also, we were talking, one of the things that was brought up earlier was display of food on ice. And for the most part, if we see food that's displayed on ice, we want to see that the ice is drained. So we don't want that food in a mix, like where the water is accumulating around it, because that can concentrate contaminants, food. So just, it can put it like in a colander type setup so the water drains on through into a catch basin. That's a good idea. I guess the only other thing I have on my list as far as setup of like farmers market would be pre-contamination of food is by adding a floor covering. You're usually out somewhere where you're not on asphalt or some kind of a hard surface. Go ahead and put some kind of a floor covering. You can use any variety of materials, but one that has been particularly useful is that roofing paper. It's non-slip and cheap, and you can throw it away. You can actually sweep it if you need to, but it does control for dust and mud and grass and things like that.
Okay.
So, any questions, y'all?
I don't see any other questions. I share email, or can people get in contact with you?
Oh, definitely, yes. Please share my email, and I'll send you a quick follow-up email with some of these links that are, in case people have trouble navigating our website. It's always under construction, so we're trying to make it better, but it has its foibles.
Right. Well, I really, really, really appreciate your time today. Thank you so much for coming.
Okay, well, good luck, everybody. I hope you have a great season. And, if there are issues, don't hesitate to reach out. We're really working with our local on getting everybody on the same page here, but it's best.
I can appreciate that. One state grouped. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
All right, everyone. I hope that was edifying. It always opens my eyes. I'm always like, oh, right. I do that. So I hope you are prepared. I sent an email out, like I said earlier, about our presentations on the 20th in Richmond. If you have questions about that, you can always reach out to me. You do have next Friday off, so please use it to complete any homeworks you haven't done yet. Or any quizzes. Bailey has probably emailed you about any quizzes you're missing. There is no quiz for today. Next Friday is off, like I said, and then the Friday after that, we will have our final module on conflict management in person in Richmond at St. Stephen's, starting at o'clock. After that, we'll get some lunch, and then you'll do your presentation, which really, again, I want you to make it as useful for yourself as possible. Please, this as a sounding board for a presentation you will probably have to do. So that could be in your situation. Do you need to present a policy change to your board? Or do you need to educate your vendors on food safety changes? Do you need to present to your city council for sponsorship or funding? Which of the models do you want to use is up to you. Please what you've learned, and we will give you feedback on any changes you might want to make to your presentation before you actually go out into the world and make it. You can make slides. I will have my computer and printer. You can handouts. It's up to you, and we'll give you feedback. So expecting your presentation is too short, 5 to 10 minutes, and comprehensive. Don't be nervous. We're all friends here. Okay? If you have any questions, just let me know. Those directions are in your assignment folder for today's module. You're off Friday, so have a good week, and I will see you in Richmond on the 20th. All right, have a good weekend. I'm very excited for this weekend. I think we all earned it. All right, have a good one, y'all. Bye.